Welcome to Chron. If you're a traveler, then you are at the right place. Please subscribe to us and press the bell icon. Some places in the world are much talked about for a reason. And yet, there are some places that you visit and wonder why people talk about them all the time. What's so great about them, really? Is it the crowds? Is it just about the hype? Let's look at all the places that merit a skip when you're making your travel plans, simply because they aren't worth the reputation that they have. But wait, I want to hear from you. What's the most overrated travel destination you've been to, and why? Tell us your stories in the comment section below. These are our picks for the top 20 overrated places which you should not visit. Times Square. Watch any film or television show about New York, and you're almost certain to get a glimpse of this iconic spot. Somehow, in the minds of the general populace, it's become associated with all that New York is. Visitors might think New York is just the glitz and glamour and commercialism that Times Square embodies. And yet, many people, both New Yorkers themselves and the quieter visitors who don't appreciate that much hustle and bustle, seem to find Times Square overrated. The most off-putting thing about Times Square, of course, is the sheer number of people. The place gets an astonishing number of 330,000 people passing through it every day. And that's just the average. While the energy and electrifying excitement of the crowd can be enlivening the first time, it's still not everybody's vibe. Even apart from that, the bright neon lights, the street performers that are always stopping people and bothering them, and the mass marketing can get very old very fast. It feels like a kind of dystopia at times, where you're just surrounded by advertisements. And the more touristy a place is, the more chance there is of you getting scammed. Instead of crowded Times Square, some other lovely options in New York is catching an off-Broadway show or taking a walk around Bryant Park. Checkpoint Charlie. The crossing point in the Berlin Wall between East Berlin and West Berlin makes it to this list because it really is nothing more than an intersection at present. Yes, it's a symbol of the Cold War. Yes, it was a fascinating piece of the history of Germany. Yes, we've all heard about the barbed wire-topped Berlin Wall and its fall. But at the end of the day, Berlin today is a growing and thriving city. There are so many things to see that Checkpoint Charlie is just a blip. It's a busy intersection that has two posters of an American and Soviet soldier facing each other. If you're a history aficionado, you can definitely go and check out the place, but for most people, there isn't anything truly interesting to see. There's a museum dedicated to the checkpoint that many also consider overrated. It's overpriced and overcrowded. It has more than 850,000 people visiting on an annual basis. Be prepared for long queues and crowds if you go to this museum. The souvenir shop too is extremely kitschy and overpriced. The museum isn't very well organized and is stuffed with a lot of random objects that don't seem to have to do much with the history of the place. If you want to take a glimpse at the complicated history of Berlin, parts of the wall are still standing, guard towers and murals included. That would be well worth a visit. There's also an outdoor exhibition called The Topography of Terror nearby, which documents the Nazi regime in Germany and the horrors they perpetrated. The Leaning Tower of Pisa. 100 miles from the truly fascinating city of Florence is a bell tower that has become famous simply because of a construction error. The tower is less than impressive to look at, especially in comparison to all the awe-inspiring architecture that Italy has to offer. From some angles, it doesn't even seem to lean at all. The only thing people go to the small town of Pisa to do is take funny pictures of themselves holding the tower. You can't blame them. There's nothing else worth doing in the place. Constructed in the 14th century, it has a 4-degree lean simply because the foundations were unstable. The price to climb to the top is no cheap fare, and at the end of 300 steps, you come to the top of an 18-story building. It's not like we haven't done something like that before. It's hardly some earth-shattering height. Crowded with tourists who've piled into buses in Florence, hoping for a glimpse at the famed Leaning Tower of Pisa, the bell tower is completely skippable. In fact, if you want to get a good view, climb to the top of the Florence Cathedral, with its famed Brunelleschi dome, and take in the views of the magnificent city. Or book a day trip to one of the many Tuscan vineyards that border the city of Florence, and indulge in good food and better wine. That would be a day well spent, rather than circling the Tower of Pisa and trying to determine which angle the lean is most prominent. Hollywood sign hike. One would first need to question whether this qualifies as a hike at all, or is just an uphill walk. Having said that, even if you did call it a hike, is it an experience worth taking part in? Most navigation apps would send you on a hike not to the Hollywood sign itself, but to other spots miles away, the Griffith Observatory and the official viewing spot being examples, from which you can see the Hollywood sign. But if you do the hike up to the sign, it is possible to do so. You might be in for some disappointment. Once upon a time, it might have been a fun trek to get really close to the sign. Alas, that's not the case anymore. Ironically enough, because of Hollywood and the number of tourists it brings to the sign. There's no question of climbing up onto the sign because of enormous fences, video surveillance, motion sensors, and in some cases, LAPD officers patrolling around. The Hollywood sign isn't a fun little hangout spot for locals anymore. No, it's become a worldwide sensation, which means massive crowds and packed tourist buses. Ask yourselves, do you really want to walk all the way through dry desert bushes and the sun beating down on your head just to take a photo from half a mile away? Wouldn't you rather go to the Griffith Observatory and take in the sign from there? The Mona Lisa. How has the Mona Lisa, a small and uninspiring little portrait, become the most famous painting in the world? When you're in the Louvre in France, with its breathtaking architecture and the amazing frescoes on the walls, why is the overcrowded Mona Lisa room the one that draws all the eyeballs? Surprisingly, the fame of the Mona Lisa had very little to do with Leonardo da Vinci's artistic merits, and more to do with an incident that took place in the 1900s. A sequence of events as it happened. An art critic called Walter Pater heaped effusive praise on the painting centuries after da Vinci painted it. And then a few decades later, a former Louvre worker called Vincenzo Peruggia stole the portrait to return it to its native Italy. At first, the authorities didn't even realize the portrait was missing. But as people began to notice the empty hook, the buzz about the painting, and Pater's words spread. He had made the Mona Lisa famous in the art world, but her being stolen and returned 2 years later made her famous to the common man. Despite that, the first impression of all tourists towards the Mona Lisa is disappointment. It's cordoned off and put behind glass, and people elbow each other for a single look and selfie with the famous lady. It doesn't make for the perfect atmosphere to enjoy art. Venice Beach happens to be a neighborhood in Los Angeles, California that was founded in 1905 as a seaside resort town. Named after the Italian city of Venice, the neighborhood is known for its canals and boardwalk. The same cannot be said about the beachfront and the Venice boardwalk. Filled with street performers, vendors, and souvenir shops, Venice Beach is as touristy as it gets. It's got a lot of tourists because stories about the atmosphere and energy of Venice Beach have spread so far. Plus, it isn't the cleanest beach around. During peak season, there are so many people that you can't walk around or just sit and tan yourself in peace. Alas, it also has large camps of homeless people and puts the housing problems of Los Angeles at the forefront of all visitors' minds. While most of these homeless people aren't a threat to safety, petty crimes like theft and harassment have been known to happen and make tourists uncomfortable. Venice Beach is a good place to watch local performers and buy art from local street artists. You can also rollerblade and play volleyball around the beach. But there are many reasons that tourists find it overrated despite the charm. Stonehenge. Stonehenge is old, and it's a mystery because no one can say for sure what the purpose of it was. This obviously draws thousands of tourists from all over the world. Since it's just 2 hours from London, Stonehenge is not hard to get to either. But is the iconic stone circle worth the visit? Especially when there's no way of getting close enough to really examine the stones anymore? The thing with Stonehenge is that everyone wants to see it, so it's always crowded and full of tourists. You also aren't actually allowed inside the circle, or to look at the stones from very close up, unless you're on some special and expensive guided tour. Thus, the whole experience slips by very fast, and you're left wondering if the trip was worth what you spent on the tickets. You should especially avoid going during the summer. because there can be up to 10,000 people a day visiting during the summer. There are tour buses all over the place. If you aren't someone very interested in history, you might skip it. After all, you'll just be walking around the periphery of some large stones. If you are someone who is interested in history, there are plenty of less well-known stone circles in Britain. Otherwise, you can make a quick visit to Stonehenge and then go on to Bath to explore the Roman baths and other architecture. The Blarney Stone. What is the Blarney Stone anyway, and what is it supposed to do for you? Well, the legend goes that this piece of limestone built into Blarney Castle in Ireland, when kissed, is supposed to give the kisser the gift of gab. What does that mean? It essentially makes them a charming and eloquent conversationalist. Locals tend to disagree and find the stone an overrated tourist trap. Firstly, going around kissing a stone that has been kissed by thousands of people before you isn't a very hygienic idea. You could be spreading around all kinds of communicable diseases. Apart from that, there are long queues and an extremely dizzy climb to look forward to, at the end of which you'll be tipped on your back and headfirst over the ledge by some bored worker so you can kiss the stone. Even with the safeguards installed, that seems risky. You could instead just walk around the castle grounds and explore the 15th century castle. There's also Blarney House, built by the same family. Or if you'd rather bypass the ruined castle altogether, you can visit Kerry and make a round of all the authentic Irish towns in the area. The Grand Canyon Skywalk. If you've heard nothing of the natural wonders that the United States has to offer, you've still probably heard of the Grand Canyon. The steep canyon, carved by the Colorado River in Arizona, can be awe-inspiring in its sheer scale. No one is arguing that the Grand Canyon is overrated, but what about the glass-bottomed Grand Canyon Skywalk, which has attracted thousands of visitors since 2007 when it was opened? The horseshoe-shaped cantilever bridge was opened purely as a tourist attraction, and a tourist attraction it remains to this day. There are so many people coming to the Skywalk on the West Rim that you'll be lucky to get a good look over the side of the canyon. It's also pretty overpriced. What with the car parking fees and the entry fee and the photography fee, you aren't allowed to carry cameras, but you can have your photograph taken for a fee. It's very hot if you're visiting in the summer, and you're waiting in long queues in the scorching heat for an experience that might well not be worth it. It's better to skip out on the Skywalk altogether. Go to the South Rim or North Rim within the national park for better views. You can hike around the Grand Canyon, and it's an especially spectacular experience if you can get down to the bottom. There are also caverns and ancient granaries to explore. The Eiffel Tower. It might be a brilliant bit of architecture, or it might be the most overrated tourist spot in the whole world, depending on the person that you ask. The thing with the Eiffel Tower is that you can't visit Paris and not go to the tower. This results in busloads of tourists, colossal lines to get to the top of the tower, and obviously ticket prices to match that. Is it a spectacular view from the top of the Eiffel Tower? Yes. Is it also true that there'll be someone right at your elbow trying to take in the same view? Yes. Would you get a marvelous view from some other site, such as the steps of the Basilique des Sacré-Cœur de Montmartre? Also yes. Even if you choose not to go to the top and just choose to take in the structure from the bottom, beware of the crowds all around. Some of the best views of the Eiffel Tower itself are from the opposite embankment anyway, rather than at the foot of the structure. The Eiffel Tower is certainly iconic, and if you have the time and energy, you should climb it. But maybe it would be best to wait for certain times of the week or day to do it. Choose a clear day and try for a weekday. The view of the sunset is really great, but that's also the time when crowds might be at their peak. An early morning walk around the Eiffel Tower might help you to absorb this piece of Parisian architecture much better. The Tower of London. An old fort on the River Thames with a rich history and a gruesome place where many people died bitterly is one of the best places to visit in England. However, it is questioned as a place with an unworthy reputation by guests who discover that the reality is weaker than its fame, and the expectations set by travel brochures. Firstly, the startup cost is exorbitant among the more expensive attractions in town, which are pretty expensive. For families and those traveling in groups, the costs can count up very fast, thus making it very inconvenient for travelers on a budget. The moment you step foot in the place, that is where the disillusionment starts from. With the tower being too crowded, it is often the case that one does not have sufficient time to immerse in the historical awareness of such a site entirely. There are often long lines, especially for the crown jewels, which could be speaking of the tower's most spectacular attraction. The visitors frequently say there are even more people in line than at the exhibits. Though the tower abounds in history, the presentations and demonstrations are only sometimes well matched with the stories of times gone by. The information supplied can sometimes feel shallow as the facets of its history either spared the public or sensationalized without the much-needed context. Besides, the tower's evocative but reclusive position detaches it from other central attractions in London, adding traveling expenses and time to expand fun sites that remain undiscovered but precious. Overall, while the Tower of London society has attracted people to some point, many tourists and high costs make it an overrated place to visit for those looking for more authentic or valuable ones here in London. Bourbon Street. The French Quarter of New Orleans is often presented as a destination for tourists looking for some NOLA thrill, only to discover that it is not all about the joyful tourists. Instead, it's all about making their money. Bourbon Street of French Quarters is famously known for its moving nightlife, along with Mardi Gras festivities, attracting travelers worldwide throughout the year. Their hockey superpower makes them very attractive, but they have different weaknesses that detract from their charms. The street has an endless stream of people, and during especially peak season and Mardi Gras festivals, it has a vast population. When there are many people from different sides of the road, it can be frustrating. Hence, the fun of visiting the area through historical aspects gets reduced. Bourbon Street has been building upon its wild reputation of vulgar outbursts, which can be unwelcoming depending on your approach to life. From a sound point of view, Bourbon Street is a non-stop slamming of loud music and performing artists shouting above one another in an attempt to catch the visitor's attention. This highly stimulative sensation, added to the powerful sense of alcohol and trash, can cause uneasiness. In addition, the emergence of shops and kitchens, similar to the whole, is part of the way tourism impacts this sector. Thus, these uniforms offer cheaper food and drinks of low quality. Careful research in avoiding Bourbon Street can help you find an authentic New Orleans experience. The Blue Lagoon, situated in Regines sub-region, Iceland, is featured in many top travel lists. Visitors are often dazzled by the stunning blue shades of the waters and the beautiful surrounding scenery. Nevertheless, a few visitors leave underwhelmed by Laguna de Colores, despite all the promotional visuals with which it is often linked. On the other hand, one impediment is the steep admission price, which skyrockets with packages that include a massage parlor. High cost affects budget travelers the most, as they end up paying an outlandish amount compared to other natural hot springs in Iceland that are priced less cheaply. The main factor that intervenes with a relaxing experience at the Blue Lagoon is crowds. The rank on this site is higher. The more people can be crowded, particularly in high season. Visitors often find themselves physically bumping their neighbors against the lagoon, which is not so cool. They flock to the serene natural area and expect the atmosphere to be soothing, but leave a jumble. In addition, the tourist attraction has become involved in commercialization, which in turn creates an artificial atmosphere at the Blue Lagoon. While one expects an improvised, natural Icelandic feel, the nearby facilities such as hostels and restaurants are practical and reduce the original flavor of the classical village life. Bondi Beach, located in Sydney, Australia, is world-renowned, with iconic photos on postcards and travel guides hanging on the walls of homes worldwide. Nevertheless, many of those people leave the beach tired and deem Bondi overrated. although they still have the opportunity to discover other quiet beaches in Sydney. The first problem is that Bondi Beach is always busy with people who flock here yearly. In high season, the beach is full of tourists and locals, and finding a relaxing place or comfortably enjoying the sea view is pretty impossible. The spoiled scenery with no space for the rest can be an unpleasant and instead more stressful than a serene place. From this, Bondi Beach has become very commercialized as well. On both sides of the area, there are expensive stores and places to eat that are mainly meant for people on vacation, and they seem unreal to anyone who's not a tourist. This atmosphere can feel so commercialized that it becomes incongruent with the vibe that most visitors relax at their beach. In addition, water quality at Bondi is suspectable, and the pollution levels can go way beyond safe conditions, especially after rainfall. This condition drastically reduces the attractiveness of swimming and other activities for which Bondi is known for, like swimming. Hollywood Walk of Fame. Situated in Los Angeles, USA, is a very well-known cultural site, with many pedestrians walking on the street indulging in the appearance of Hollywood stars embedded on the sidewalk. Despite its fame and the fact that it has been in many movies for a while, this place may disappoint many people. For many guests, the overwhelming number of people that the Walk of Fame is comprised of tends to be the primary problem. The footpaths are commonly congested by passers-by, thus adding delay while maneuvering the destination. This disorganization is exacerbated by several street performers, who are noisy as they vigorously solicit tips while people eagerly take a picture, adding to the chaos. Although the condition of the Walk of Fame might need to be in better shape, it seems the place is abandoned, with many celebrity sheets falling off. This phenomenon substitutes the glamour of the Hollywood brand that one might expect to see. Besides that, locals feel that the territory is unsafe, especially at night, since the neighborhood has a well-earned frequency of petty re-advertising gear around the region, which is also negative because it is surrounded by shops that sell overpriced, tasteless merchandise. These outlets are designed to profit significantly from the high number of tourists while giving nothing in return. While the glamour of the Hollywood Walk of Fame might initially attract visitors seeking a fulfilling experience, more in-depth programs such as a museum visit or other scenic places that are off the beaten path will finally lead to more enriching experiences. The London Eye. One of the most iconic sites in the city, and is on the must-see list for London. Even though tourists admire its signs, they describe the London Eye as overrated primarily because of the high cost and the experience it offers. The cost is the second major disadvantage that is raised. The price of a standard adult ticket to the London Eye is notoriously high. It goes further up the scale when you need to pay fast track, which also includes a glass of champagne. It becomes prohibitive for families when comparing the price with other ways of watching or other attractions in London that are of the same standard. Moreover, the feeling can be far from exciting. Each rotation lasts approximately 30 minutes, and the views of London's skyline, though breathtaking as they are primarily passive. You may feel that time stretches unbearably as the capsule fills up with passengers. The crowd is also a principal issue, where the lines are usually the most popular, especially during high season for tourism, which could be the reason for having a quick trip after getting on the bus for the people who are looking for views of London. The Shard and the Sky Garden are good options, as they offer a similar sight without the requirement of money to ride the excellent but usually overcrowded London Eye. These choices are more flexible than buses, and most are equipped with extra facilities like Wi-Fi that make the whole experience of viewing London from the sky even better. Venice, the perfect description for the picturesque town. With tourist boats roaming legendary canals and lovers scattered around with gondola rides. Nevertheless, the tourists are often disappointed because they associate uncertainty with Venice, and that it is at least overrated because of crowds and high costs. The situation worsens even more when trying to cope with over-tourism, especially during high travel seasons, especially at famous events like the Venice Carnival. The passageways and footbridges are also loaded with tourists that making it through the city could be exhausting. This also contributes to the congestion, which is anathema to the grace and peace days experienced in literature and film. Destination-wise, Venice could be draining for travelers, both economically and physically. Tourists spend a good fortune on food and accommodation in the city, and most services cost more to multiply the number of tourists who could exploit for a higher profit. Just a gondola ride can bring boredom even though tourists are accustomed to paying much for it, and they bustle through the crowded waterways without the expected glimpse of intimacy and a sense of serenity. Eventually, the situation changed because of the increased commercial side of Venice, with commodity shops in which everybody could get some souvenirs, and they could spoil everything going on there. While Venice is an excellent example of an alive city, some of its traditions have been overtaken by tourism. The Italian cities take a less commercial and genuine route for those visitors who want to experience the artistic beauty of the Italian cities. Alternatives such as Verona are better options. Tulum. Formerly a peaceful haven with heavenly beaches along with impressive Mayan ruins, is a notion that has turned into a phrase for many travelers. The unsustainable growth in recognition resulted in a profound compromise in terms of the initial peaceful features of mindfulness. Crowds have become one of the principal problems in Tulum, especially during the high season for tours. The volume of tourists exceeds the capabilities of the town to handle them. As a result, beaches become overcrowded and waiting to be served in restaurants and attractions becomes long. Conversely, this has led to an environmental decline, especially considering waste management. Tulum, particularly economically, has been considered relatively expensive. Accommodation, dining, and activities have more markups than the corresponding higher quality. The cost of going to Tulum now is the same as going to fancy places, which weakens its appeal of being an affordable tropical destination. In addition, Tulum commercialization has intensified. An increasing number of boutiques and expensive restaurants aimed at arriving tourists from abroad have emerged rather than preserving the local culture. This shift might trigger some people to think Tulum has become an identical resort town rather than a genuinely cultural destination, because its unique features are lost. Those who want a more tranquil Mexican coast experience have great options like Isla Holbox Beach, which are serene. Goa. Well known for its beaches and buzz at night, always attracts tourists in the very first place. Many people think Dan's project is too harsh or the most challenging one, but others still look forward to trying it for some reason. Another core issue is the great deal of change that it has gone through since it got associated with tourism. The formerly secluded beaches in Goa have become overcrowded, especially the famous ones like Baga. This excessive visitor inflow is the cause of environmental pressure, which becomes more evident due to the large amount of litter everywhere. On the other hand, Goa's tourism industry has become totally deprived of its qualities due to extreme commercialization. One can easily buy machine-made products from large markets and shops instead of genuine crafts. To some extent, the mushrooming of cafes and clubs seems a good thing. However, in general, they drown and choke the originality of Goan culture, embedded into its rich history and thus Portugal-influenced culture. The nightlife many tourists like can quite often not meet their expectations. Most of the activities center on mostly narrow neighborhoods. Therefore, one might find large numbers of people within a few places to the extent of having a somewhat dull party environment, with little of the allure you might have expected. Besides, the vacation rates at Goa shoot up to the max during the peak season of travel. Here, categories of expenditure that include accommodations, transport, and activities can end up being as expensive compared to the prices in more developed tourist destinations, and you may not be able to determine the worth of the experience from them. Travelers looking for fewer crowds, a quieter side of India, or less visited beaches in India, Karnataka might give them a feeling of satisfaction. Fisherman's Wharf. A well-known tourist spot established as its historical waterfront and park with the San Francisco Maritime National Historical Park based there. Nevertheless, this park is among the most considerable, skimming subjects and has different drawbacks. The area is liked so much that the clientele presents an enjoyable visit, as all the attractions tend to become too busy. This congestion occurs more likely during high season, and thanks to that, it would be hard to get a comfortable passage and take time to see the sights. Among the significant concerns, commercialization is probably the most important one. Fisherman's Wharf is busy with shops and fast food restaurants, whose services are put to substitute for the demands of tourists rather than to keep quality. First, their products are generally overpriced, followed later by underwhelming food selections that make them lack the authentic San Francisco gastroeconomic experience that foodies usually enjoy. Besides, the old Fisherman Wharf traditions, which made it unique, have been lost as visitors can now be entertained by showy entertainment. The significance of the local historical resources is frequently underestimated due to traps for tourists. These objects neglect to provide the tourist with an enhanced comprehension of San Francisco's great maritime cultural heritage. Those tourists seeking a more reasonable San Francisco experience should visit the other neighborhoods, such as the Mission District. The tourists might have grasped the history of San Francisco better. Fisherman's Wharf would not present a lot of crowds and commercial pressures. And there you have it. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Ever been to these places? If you enjoyed this video, show us some love by hitting that like button and subscribing to our channel for more awesome content in the future. See you in the next video.